Hello and welcome to the Fit and Free podcast. This is a podcast for women who want it all, to feel strong and confident in their bodies, as well as enjoying a sneaky mug on a Friday night. I'm an exercise physiologist and sports nutritionist, here to teach you how to achieve your body goals without food and your body controlling your life. So let's jump in. Hello you guys, welcome back to another ep of the Fit and Free Potty. I am on such a high right now because I just jumped off an amazing interview. I had one of my really good friends jump on the podcast with me today, and she's actually a practicing psychologist. And we had a beautiful conversation, and I know it's going to help you guys so much into bringing into your awareness some things that actually might be cock blocking you, aka a blind spot, from stopping you from reaching your body composition goals. I feel like this is the missing piece for so many people because so many people have so much attachment to needing their body to look a certain way. And I'm so excited to dive deep into why this can actually be a big problem and ways to start moving forward with all of this. We're speaking to things like self-worth, self-esteem, how to change your negative self-talk, and how to start cultivating self-acceptance and moving forward in a journey of this. I'm super excited to hear what you guys think from the episode. So like always, don't forget to share it on your Instagram story and tag me so I know that you're listening. And if you haven't left a review yet and you are loving the episode, I would really appreciate it if you could take the time to just open Apple Podcasts, open the Fit and Free Academy, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see a little review panel. All you have to do is put 5 stars and even write me a little love letter because I absolutely love reading those. And it really does help support me to grow this podcast. And as you already know, I want to get this into as many listeners' ears as possible. So with that being said, let's jump into the episode. Hello, Kim. Thank you so much for coming on to the Fit and Free podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. I would love it if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to the path of psychology.
Thanks. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here. I'm super, super happy. It's been quite some time since I've got to chat with you, so excited to be here. I always struggle when people are like, tell me a bit about yourself, because I'm like, oh, but I guess I am originally from Melbourne, so moved over here when I was a bit younger, about 10. So Perth's sort of been my home. I do the usual Perth stuff, go to the beach, go for walks. Just started doing Pilates, which I found a lot harder than what I thought it would be. Do some painting in my downtime, seeing friends, being social, that sort of thing, outside of work. I guess in terms of work and what I do, I've been a registered psych for the past year and a half. So I've been studying for, God knows, I think 6 years all up.
Wow.
So finally been out working now fully qualified, and I do a range of different things. So I see clients one-on-one. I also do some group therapy work with veterans that have been diagnosed with PTSD. So they've got trauma. So we do some trauma therapy there, which is super, super hectic, but great. And then I do ADHD assessments. So people that think they might have a diagnosis of ADHD, I sit them down, have a big old chat with them, and then I write a massive report to the psychiatrists and then, go from there. So I'm kept very busy at the moment.
Absolutely. Like every time I hear that kind of story, it inspires me so much because like what you do on a daily basis is so inspiring because you're helping people at such a deep level, and it's just like, it's so wild. So I really appreciate you taking the time and coming on and talking all things. How do I even say that? All things like, I was going to say psych related, but that doesn't make sense.
All things mental health.
Thank you. All things mental health and how that really does affect people's decisions with their nutrition and exercise. Because I know for a fact, like myself, like I struggled with my sense of self-worth for a really long period of time. And this is why I really want to have this conversation, is because I don't think a lot of people actually realize that their lack of self-worth and them are tying their worth and value to their body or like the size
Yeah.
of the clothes is really impacting how they're showing up with their nutrition and exercise. Because if like, that's definitely my story, is like I only felt good enough unless I was in a smaller body, and or if I was a size 8. And I look at that, I'm like, oh my God, I just want to shake you, because like you're so much more than that. So I'm really, really excited to have this conversation so we can shine light onto this topic and even bring into people's awareness that this might be happening from them, for them as well. So with that being said, I would love it if you could define what self-worth actually means, because I know for a really long time, like I didn't even know what self-worth was. I was like, what?
Yeah.
And I would love to know why that's important.
Yeah, great question. I think it's important to, I guess, break it down in the difference between what self-esteem and what self-worth is. So I think when we think about self-esteem, it's how you think and you feel about yourself, based on external factors. So based on other things in the environment, other things that are going on, and that impacts your mood, your circumstances, how you're reacting to things. Obviously, in like your immediate environment. But if we think about self-worth, it's internally driven. So it's the knowledge that we have about ourselves and how good we feel. Like, are we good enough? What are, I guess, our beliefs about ourselves and our worth as a person. So it's internally driven, whereas I feel like self-esteem is externally driven and it's based on other factors. And I guess when we think about self-worth, it's good to sort of think about the two of them and how they can sort of be codependent and influenced by one another. And I guess the importance of that is, if we think about self-worth, it really impacts our thoughts, our behaviors, and the way that we read and we interpret things in our everyday life. So if we, have high self-worth or low self-worth, you can really see how that's going to impact how you read a situation, how you react and respond to things, what you find important or what you place value in as well. So yeah, it has a massive impact on all that side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think you've, like, for me personally, talking completely from personal experience, like I didn't realize that because I had a low sense of self-worth was the reason why I was choosing the things and acting in the way that I was. Especially like with my nutrition, because like, because I didn't have that sense, I was always going back into a restrictive pattern anytime I body checked, and I was like, oh my God, my body looks too big, I need to go back into my restriction, and sabotage ultimately what I was doing. So that's an amazing definition, and I really like how you break it down between the difference between self-esteem and self-worth, and because I think a lot of people would probably get that confused.
Yeah.
So I would love it if you could give us some signs that someone has a sense of low self-worth. If someone's thinking, like sitting there being like, oh, okay, maybe this is something that I do need to look at. Maybe this is something I do need to address. This is actually happening to me as well. What are some signs that they have a low sense of self-worth, or they might be attaching it to something external, like their body or the number on the scale?
I think what I've found in with the clients that present in session is that the first thing I can recognize is their self-talk. So the way that they talk about themselves is completely different. So it is quite negative. It's quite doubtful. We're very self-critical.
Yep.
And it's just that sense of, oh, I can't do that. Or, I should have done this better. Or I behaved in this particular way. And it's just this sense of like self-doubt, shame, very critical, very negative. And I guess some of the things that you can see is the way that they respond to particular situations or things in their environment. So if they have like, I guess, low self-worth in relation to, well, I guess if they have low self-worth in general, you might see how that comes out with work. So they might come in and be like, oh, I made this mistake, or like, I'm not good enough, or I didn't put my hand up for that promotion, or it can look like, I guess, their narrative and what their story sounds like in their life in general. But then it can also, like you said, be in relation to exercise. It can be in relation to something that they're placing their self-worth in as well, if that makes sense. So generally speaking, it's that language that they use about themselves, but then it's also, you can see it specifically with behaviors or things they've attached their self-worth to. So if it's with exercise, it's the thoughts, the behaviors, the story, the narrative around exercise, and it would be quite negative, or it'll be quite like they'll be quite sensitive to that particular area because that's where they've attached their self-worth to, as opposed to different things. Like we might not be as fussed about things that are happening with our friendships or with our relationships or with work, but if it's in terms of training and my body shape, what I look like, then that language will sound very different. That's what I would say, if that answers your question.
Absolutely does, because that's it. And I think that is a really beautiful way of putting it in terms of like the negative self-talk and the criticism and then shame. Can you keep elaborating on the food bit?
Yeah. So I think if we look at where we place our self-worth, if we place it in external factors, then we're more sensitive to that when we feel like it's not within our control, or we don't have a hold of it, or if it's not going well, if that makes sense. So if you think, my self-worth is placed externally on my body weight, my shape, my size, what clothing size I am, or what weight, what number is on the scale, then you will be more sensitive to those things changing. So you'll see that, you'll get really upset, you'll get super down, or you'll see your mood change really incredibly just by what you've had on the scale for that day. And all the other stuff won't concern you because that's where you've placed your self-worth, in your size and what you look like. In terms of body checking and looking at yourself in the mirror and measurements and things like that and photos, all of that stuff you'll be more preoccupied with. All of that stuff you'll be super sensitive to, any sort of changes, whether that's positive or negative, because you've placed your self-worth in something external, and that is that external factor. So when that fluctuates, your mood fluctuates, your self-esteem fluctuates, your thoughts, your behaviors, everything fluctuates, because I've seen it in session where people go, oh, I just felt so happy when my weight went down this week, or I loved that my stomach didn't feel as bloated, and I love that it didn't feel so full, and that sort of thing. But the second that changes, because of, and I guess I'm jumping ahead here, when those things are outside of our control, because it's externally, we know that, our weight and all of that sort of thing is determined by so many other factors. That's where we get caught out, because when it does change and we don't have control over that, and we've attached our self-worth so highly to that, that's where people get stuck. And that's where it's just this revolving door cycle of, okay, well, how can I get back control? How can I pull this back a bit? Do I need to reduce my food? Do I need to cut this particular food group out? Do I need to exercise more? Do I change my exercise type? It's all of that stuff, but it's all centered around this idea of, I am good enough because I am this size, or I am good enough when I can fit this particular type of clothing. So when that changes, it creates a whole internal shift and change within us.
Yeah, and that really shines light to why this is actually such a big problem, and why it's such a big issue for so many women, because of that attachment. Is then they're jumping to either like, let's try a new diet, let's go back into a calorie deficit, let's skip breakfast, let's have a black coffee. And then it also, what I see all time and time again, it's just that constant dialogue of, am I doing this right? I'm putting in so much effort, yet I'm not seeing any results. So it's so beautiful. And I love the way that you explain that, because it's going to help people realize that because we have so much attachment, and, because of we're attaching our worth to those external things, is the reason why like people give up so early on a nutrition and exercise journey. I had an experience with a client actually today, and like she was getting caught up in her head because she wasn't seeing results, because she looked at her after, like her progress photo, and it wasn't exactly what she wanted to see. So then she made it mean that she wasn't seeing results. But then when I came in and looked at both of the photos, I'm like, there is so much change within the photos, but she didn't see it because she still had so much of attachment to the photo evidence. So therefore she's still got a lot of worth and value tied to her body. So you can see how it can really influence the way that anyone is showing up on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So if someone is struggling with this, what is the first steps someone should take to help them break free of this attachment?
I think from, I guess, my space, the first thing I would think about is going and talking to a professional, and getting the right education and the right guidance and the right support. And I say that in a very delicate way because I think there is so much access to misinformation out there. And I guess from your background, I know you've spoken about this before, but it's so true. Like, it's not hard to jump on and look at a quick fix. It's not hard to follow someone that doesn't have a qualified background in exercise, nutrition, or anything in that matter, mental health even. So I think when it comes to our lifestyle and our diet and our nutrition, and building a healthier relationship with that, I think you need to pick the right people to, I guess, give you the best chance of healing that relationship. So that might look like, can you chat to your GP, and they look at referring you to a dietitian, or is it a nutritionist? Is it, like you said, an exercise physio? Is it going to someone that is educated within that field and can give you the right knowledge and give you the right plan and the right support to kind of get you back on track? Because I feel like if you've got an unhealthy relationship with food and you've got unhealthy patterns attached to food, that's really important to get the right support, because you can do more damage and you can be misled by people that take advantage of that, that are not qualified, that do not have the right skill set to be able to educate you in the way out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I see it all the time. It's like I had a conversation with a different client the other day, and she was like, oh, I'm just looking at all these what I eat in a day videos, and all these girls are eating like 15,000 calories, and like, is that what I should be doing? Now I'm eating too much because I'm looking at these, these fit chicks, and I'm like, I want to look like that, but I'm eating more. That means I must be eating too much.
Yeah.
So I love that you bring that up, because it's so important, especially if you're coming from a place with like a poor relationship with food and exercise, because like I see it all the time with people just try and go and, follow another meal plan or follow another macros from another nutrition coach who doesn't specialize in this area. And then they end up just at square, like making it worse, because, then they come into the place of like, yo, well, if you're not following the meal plan or you're not following the macros, that means that you're not disciplined enough. You don't have willpower, which then makes you feel like absolute shit, but then it just makes the problem worse.
Yeah.
So finding the right help and guidance is so, so important. Do you have any other tips for someone who might be struggling with this as well?
I think if, like, financially that's a barrier for you, because I'm mindful that it's expensive to go see a professional, especially in this day and age anyway, I would be, I guess, like, trying to go to the right places where you can get the information freely accessible. So is it like going on to some of the government websites that give that information about correct, like, eating and correct balance between foods? Also, I guess there's a lot of podcasts like yourself, you're here freely accessible, that you can get that correct information. So it's also looking at, are there particular podcasts or people within the area on Instagram, on social media, through, all those sorts of audio avenues that I can still access before, I have the financial means to be able to afford to see them one-on-one, but you can still have access to that information as well. I think another thing would be as well, just being curious and aware of what your language is and what your behaviors are, what your thoughts are. So I guess coming from my space, my first question would be, where have you picked this up from? Where did this start? So where did this relationship with food begin? What's the language been around food at home? What have been some things that you may have started this story towards food and towards having our value placed in something, and with food and nutrition and exercise, um, and trying to challenge some of that stuff and trying to reframe and rewire that. So that doesn't have to be your language, that doesn't have to be your story, but it seems to be there for a reason. Like it's having a purpose, and it's, thinking about, is my purpose really and is my value placed purely on this, or can I find value and worth in other areas, and starting to put more energy and more emphasis and enjoyment in that. Because what I've done with clients that have disordered eating is I what I typically do is draw a pie chart. So I draw a circle, and within that circle I go, okay, so how much of this is important to you? Like, write it, draw it down for me. And what I tend to find, what we tend to see, is that a massive chunk of that pie chart is got to do with their food, their eating, their exercise, their body shape, what they look like, because that's how much they've placed their value and self-worth in it. So even just visually seeing and looking at that and going, okay, now put in everything else that's important to you. And 9 times out of 10, they find they don't have as much room to fit everything else in, because they're so preoccupied with all of these other preoccupations with exercise, food, nutrition. So if all of that other stuff is so overwhelming, it's maybe just doing something as simple as drawing that out and going, okay, well, how much am I placing on this? And be honest, no one else is going to be looking at it. And then going, okay, well, then what I then get them to do is draw another pie chart and go, okay, well, what would you want it to look like? What are the things that are important to you? Draw your friends, draw your family, draw your hobbies. What portion of that do they take up in that pie chart? And then how much do you actually want to be putting into exercise, nutrition, my weight, my shape, my appearance? And how much of that do you feel is more balanced and healthier? 9 times out of 10, they go, yeah, I actually like the look of that one as opposed to the look of the other one. So that could be a really easy exercise to do, to go, okay, hang on a minute, this is so skewed. How can I start actually putting more emphasis on the things that I enjoy and that are actually important to me, that are so much more than what we look like?
Yeah, that's such a beautiful exercise. And if anyone's struggling with that, like, that is a perfect first step, because like, I know for a fact that like a lot of people are afraid of allowing themselves to not have this, that level of control and preoccupation, because they're so terrified of, if they're not controlling everything, then they're just going to go backwards. And I know a lot of people are making that mean like, well, if I stop focusing so much on nutrition and exercise, then I'm going to gain weight and I'm going to quote unquote get fat. So, but what I know to be true, because I've seen it time and time again, is like, just because we don't have that crazy fixation doesn't mean our body is going to change in a negative way. More often than not, it actually changes in a positive way, because we don't have that crazy fixation on our body, and because we're fulfilling our needs in a positive way, we're actually putting time and attention into our hobbies and into spending time with family and all of the things that, like, nutrition and exercise is just something that we do and we keep ticking over, and we get good body composition changes with that. But then it's no longer this crazy roller coaster of emotion, because we don't have all of that value onto that. So I think that's I would love to know if you have anything to add into that conversation. Have you ever worked with people who are, a little bit afraid of like loosening up the control?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think in terms of what you were speaking to, like, they're worried that if they don't, then they're not going to get the results, or it's not going to end in the way that they wanted to. But I think it's less about that and less on and more about how much of this is preoccupying your life, how much of this time, energy, mental exhaustion, this rigidity and the rules that you have, how much of this is actually benefiting you, how much of this is actually allowing you to live the life that you want. And I think by reducing the standards, the expectations and the rules that we have around food and around our nutrition and exercise and our body weight and our shape, we actually allow ourselves to, like I said, find value and find importance and enjoyment and have a better quality of life, because we're actually placing it in things that are within our control. We have control over our relationships. We have control over who we spend our time with, finding our purpose, applying that to work and hobbies and other interests in our relationships. It's less about these things that are outside of our control. And I guess what people can do is they fall into that trap of placing that external factor, and I guess getting that validation and getting that internal validation, I think, from something external. But that's impossible to maintain. It's impossible to manage because it's forever changeable, especially for females. Our weight, our nutrition, our body shape changes because of all these different factors. So if you're placing really high standards and rigidity and rules on something that constantly changes, then your validation and your worth is constantly going to be changing, as is your self-esteem. So I think it's changing the idea of, if I let that go, then everything's going to be let go. Like everything's going to, turn to shit. But it's not. It's more, I'm actually no longer being ruled and affected by things that are unhealthy stories and unhealthy narratives and unhealthy behaviors. And I actually can live a really healthy, fulfilling life and still feel enjoyment in nutrition and exercise, but we're having a completely different relationship with it, because it's not the be all and end all of who I am as a person and what determines my worth and if I'm good enough.
Very well said. I really like that. Absolutely. It's so true. It's so true. And at the end of the day, like, if you are placing the worth and the value in it, all it does is, like you already said, it sets you up on a roller coaster and ultimately on a failure loop. Because when you can fully let go of it, like still show up, like you're still going to get the results, just without all the rigidity and all the rules. And also you're going to, like you said, have a much more fulfilling life, because you actually get to do things that make you happy on a daily basis, which is really important. So I love that so much. I want to move the conversation in and around self-acceptance now. So I would love it if you could kind of give the listeners an idea of what self-acceptance is and why accepting yourself is so important.
Yeah, so I think if we think about what self-acceptance is, I guess it's in the name. We are accepting oneself of all of our qualities, all of our unique, I guess, little nuances that we have, but that also includes the not so positives part of, like, that make us whole. So it's not just, oh, I'm great at this, I'm great at that, I've got these really exceptional qualities, but it's also accepting the things that we can't change and the things that are part of our history, that are part of our story. And it's having a healthier relationship with that as well. I guess that, to me, is what self-acceptance is that these things that I carry, yes, I might have had, adversity, I might have had traumas, I might have had a difficult start to life, but that's not to say that you can't form a relationship with those parts in a healthy and positive way.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up, because it's like I struggled personally with this for years. Like there was so many things about myself that I wasn't willing to accept, and I would always make the bad parts of me, or the things that I wasn't good at, as wrong. And then a lot of the time I would make that very personal, being like, well, I'm not good at that. That means I'm not good enough. So learning how to accept myself it was challenging, like, let's be real. I really feel like it is. But on the other side of it, like, life becomes so much more freeing and so much more exciting, because it's no longer this thing of like, well, my stomach is fat, therefore I'm wrong and I'm not good enough. It's now like, oh, my stomach is my stomach and that is perfect for who I am, and I'm really
Yeah.
grateful for my body and how
Yeah.
it shows up for me every single day. And it's no
Yeah.
longer like, I'm no longer picking my nutrition and my exercise to make my stomach smaller, which for a
Yeah.
really long period of time I did. So I know for a really long time, like I was afraid to accept parts of my body because like I was in this space of like, I just hate, like I hated my stomach so much. And like I said, it was really the driving force behind the way I was eating and the way I was training. And like I had a lot of resistance in and around like accepting my body for what it was, because like I was so afraid of like then I was never going to be loved, or I was never going to be accepted, or all of the stories that I had personally. And a big one for me was like, well, if I accept my body, that means I'm going to let myself go. That means
Yeah.
I'm unhealthy. And I know now that's not true, but I would
Yeah.
love it if you could explain a little bit about this, if you've like had any experience with clients being afraid of coming to a point of self-acceptance because they too might be afraid of what they're making that mean in terms of, I'm not healthy, I'm not disciplined, maybe I've let myself go.
Great question. I think the first thing I would be looking at is, like I mentioned before, it's their self-talk. So how do you talk to yourself? How do you treat yourself? How do you behave towards your body? How do you behave towards looking after yourself? What does that look like? And sort of moving towards that self-compassion. So giving yourself the care, the love, the respect um, that you deserve,
Yeah.
because we deserve it. And I guess,
Everyone deserves it. I'm going to say that again and again.
yeah. And it's easier said than done, because if we think about it, like when we're younger as kids, we don't hate ourselves. We think we're the bee's knees. We think, we're the best thing since sliced bread. But it's not until when we're older that society tells us, that family patterns tell us, that relationships tell us, that friendships tell us, that all these other things get in the way of how we see ourselves. And then we pick that story up, we pick this narrative up, and we go, yep, okay, well, this is how I should talk to myself, or this is how people treat me, and this is acceptable. And the issue is it's not. Like it's not okay. And if we don't have a chance to actually reflect on that and go, how much of this is my stuff? Or am I carrying this from someone else? Someone else has told me this when it's actually not true. Um, I think, yeah, sort of being curious and reflecting on where that's come from, where that's been picked up from, I think is really important in starting to build that awareness and insight to like what started this. And it just sort of snowballs from there. So, um, yeah, I think being curious and not doing it in a shameful way as well. I think we can be our own worst critics and we can beat ourselves up worse than anyone else can. Um, so I think when I talk about self-compassion, it's also being kind. Like, um, we shouldn't need to punish ourselves. We shouldn't be hard on ourselves because we haven't hit a weight or a PB goal, or, the nutrition goals that we did, or we've, changed and fluctuated in our clothes. Like, that shouldn't be met with guilt, with shame, with pressure, with criticism. It should be, I am doing the best that I can. I have a lot of stuff on my plate at the moment. I'm still looking after my body. It's changing that language, I think. And like you said, changing the language we have towards ourselves, instead of that self-hatred that I should be this, you must be this size, or I won't feel good enough, or I won't be happy until this is reached, or I meet this goal. It's more, okay, where can I need to get to a place where I'm happy with who I am, because you are who you are, and we can't necessarily change really what we look like. To some degree we can. Yes, there's things and products and all that sort of thing, but there's only so much we can do with our body. And I think it's having the self-acceptance of, this is the body that I've been given, so I want to make sure I look after it, and I'm going to treat it with respect, and I'm going to be kind to it, and I need to find parts that I do actually really love, and it needs to be away from this particular shape or this size, because there's so many things out there that says, you can be put on the same diet, you can be put on the same exercise plan and still not look the exact same, because it's just not how it works. We are different. And we need to be mindful of that. And we can't keep comparing and going, yep, cool, I'm going to be happy when I look like this, when that is not our body type, when that's not the way that our metabolism works, that our hormones are playing factor, that biologically it's playing factor. So there's all these things that I guess get in the way of us being able to accept ourselves. And that comes from us. It doesn't come from anybody else. That happens internally.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the word self-respect, and I've heard you say it a few times because like it's so big that like, people call themselves healthy and they're like, they're eating really healthy and they're like driving themselves into the ground with their exercise because of this negative self-talk and they're wanting to look a certain way. They call themselves healthy, but how is that healthy? How is that self-respect when you actually look at it from like an objective lens of what you're really actually doing to your body? And this is why I'm like actually so passionate about this stuff. It's because like in this space, like people don't even think about their health. They don't even think about what they're actually doing because they're so preoccupied on needing their body to be a certain way and like trying to change their genetic blueprint that is like next to impossible. Like we got to thank our mamas for giving
Yeah.
for them giving us what we have, because at the end
Yeah.
of the day, like we are so unique and that's everyone's superpower. And when people start recognizing that, following any sort of nutrition and exercise plan becomes a hell of a lot fucking easier.
Yeah. And it's just, finding and accepting that you need to find something that works for you. And it shouldn't be at the cost of your self-worth. It shouldn't be at the cost of your mental health. It shouldn't be at the cost of your period, your hormones, all of that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. And another thing that you said was about comparison. Like it's really easy to fall into comparison when you're stuck in these cycles. So what's your advice that you would give to someone who is, stuck in that comparison loop? Maybe they're sitting on social media and they're looking at the fit spo girls. What do you, who are eating 1,200 calories and having a green juice and, doing like eating, probably not even actually showing you what they're really eating and what they're really doing in a day, but that's a different conversation. What would you say to someone that's stuck in that comparison loop?
I think if we think about what influences us and what creates like good positive habit changes, I think of James Clear's book, like Atomic Habits, and looking at your environment. So I think if we get into the habit of following these people that are not healthy, that are not qualified, that do not have the background or experience, that are probably genetically gifted and good for them, then it's going to completely keep you in that negative feedback loop of, I should be doing better. I'm not doing enough. I need to do this exercise. I should do this diet. I need to cut my calories. It keeps that narrative, it keeps that story going. So I think if we think about how to stop self-comparison and also how to help with self-acceptance and change that story and change that self-worth, it's following people, and I guess we've all heard of it, follow people that are good for your mental health, that are a good influence on you, that have a healthy relationship with their body, that are, I guess, what's the word I'm trying to find, that are like a variety of different body shapes and body types, that do different exercises, that show you like a healthy, and they've got a healthy relationship with food. And I guess you can see the difference for the people that do have that to the people that are great with sticking to and are so stringent on this particular diet or program. Like that's not sustainable. Follow the people that have sustainable lives that you see going out and enjoying themselves and actually not having a crap relationship with their food. So I think following people that make you feel good about yourself and that are not unrealistic is a great way to start that.
Yeah, I love that. And especially like with the growth of like the online PTs and the online coaches, and a lot of them are coming from the bodybuilder world. Like I see it time and time after again. And like these bodybuilders are showing their physique as their marketing material. Like good on them. Like sure, it absolutely works. But it's like it was a perfect example of, I shared something on my Instagram story last night. It was a bodybuilder who had a photo of like the days before her prep, and then like at the end of a bulk, and like the days before her prep, like she looked fucking shredded, of course.
Yeah.
But like she didn't have her period. She had really poor performance. She was not going out and being social at all. She was super rigid. She was exercising, like she was doing 5 days cardio and 4 days strength training. And the problem I see with that is like people are comparing themselves to this such unrealistic thing, which is then perpetuating those thought patterns of, oh, I should do this, I should do that, I should do this, which is really like, it's not healthy for anyone, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So with that being said, if someone is struggling in this space and they need to start, you know, changing the way that they speak to themselves and auditing their self-talk and really working towards the journey of self-acceptance, because like, let's be real, this is not something that just happens overnight. This is a, you know, you got to dedicate yourself to change, because at the end of the day, you're like, you know, shifting neural pathways and reframing patterns and stories and all of our conditioning. So someone who is here, what's some first steps that they could start on?
I think, like I said, obviously the self-talk side of things, so being mindful of that, but I also would be curious to wonder what that voice is there for, I guess, because we always have I say this all the time, there's always a function behind the
Yeah.
behavior. And finding out what that function is really, really important to understanding why is it coming up? Why do I keep doing it? What's the impact? Why is it influencing what I do? And that can also look internally. What are those thoughts? Like why do I have these negative thoughts? Where has this come from? Why is it there? Is it to remind me I'm a bad person, or I'm shameful, or I'm not good enough? Like where has that come from? And why is that there? Like sometimes that voice can be a protective factor in remembering. I'm just going to remember. I'm going to remind you that you should feel guilty about this, or I'm going to remind you that it was your fault, or you don't deserve to be happy, or you don't deserve this, or I'm not good enough. And it's really kind of maybe being curious to where that's been picked up and changing that story and that narrative as well. And I think starting to act in a way that you are being kinder to yourself and you're respecting yourself. So, what are your strengths? What are your qualities? What do you enjoy doing? And starting to engage more in that. So, like again, what I said before, steering away to the emphasis on exercise and nutrition. Yes, that's obviously important, but what else makes part of you? Because we have several different parts of ourselves. Are we an auntie? Are we a good sibling? Are we a mother? Are we a good teacher? How do you show up at work? Do we do volunteering? Are there hobbies and interests that we find other purpose and enjoyment in? Doing those sorts of things, and also that self-care piece as well. So start looking after yourself, don't, and it sounds silly, but don't just wait until it's a good occasion or an evening that you do dress up or you do, like, how do you treat yourself? Like treating yourself with the respect of, I'm going to look after myself. What does that look like? Does it look like food? Does it look like spending time socially? Does it look like the way that I dress and the things that I like to wear, or the makeup that I use, or all of that sort of thing? Like, just starting to change that, and really sort of, you can do it internally but also externally as well.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up in terms of like less little things every single day that you can do for yourself that brings you joy and happiness. And just, you know, just putting a little bit of makeup on and doing your hair. Like, sure, you might not need to, but like if it makes you feel good, then absolutely, we're here
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
One thing you said before was environment, and I thought that that is so important. Like that's something that I have really learned, especially over the last 5 years, of how much your environment influences the way that you show up every day. And I can reflect back on that when I used to have all of these struggles. Like a lot of my conversations I was having was always about, how many calories are you on? What
Yeah.
diet are you on at the moment?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing with your nutrition and exercise? So I think that's
Yeah.
it. I'm really grateful actually that you brought that up, because cleaning up that not only cleaning up your social media and making sure you're following realistic people that are really modeling a really, you know, where you actually want to be in terms of like your life, not just a body.
Yeah.
And also like look at where you're the conversations you are having literally in the lunchroom. Like there is nothing worse than it. Just like, oh, it makes me feel ick about like going into a lunchroom at work and talking about the diet I'm on. But it's so common.
Yeah.
So I think really important space that people need to look at as well is their environment to help them in this process and in this journey of self-acceptance and building their work.
I think, definitely. And also thinking about, like if you want to, I guess it's that thinking about confirmation bias. So we look in our environment and we look for things that confirm what we believe to be true. So if you think you're not good enough, you will find every reason, you will find it in a situation, you will find it in what you've done to say, yes, no, this is true. And I guess we're very quick to find those things and we're not as quick to understand that there's all these other things that we're missing out on. And we're missing that we're actually being a really good quality friend, and we're missing out that I'm actually really talented in this particular area, like finding things and finding ways to prove to yourself that there is so much more there than just what we're choosing to focus on. And I guess that can also help with self-acceptance as well. You can find things in your environment. You can gravitate to the people that don't talk about those particular things. All of that can play a really big part as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's literally something that is what we're implementing this week actually inside the Fit Free Academy. It's like I've set up a daily challenge of everyone has to post in the group one thing they like about themselves, whether that's emotional or physical, because like it's so true. When you're as caught in this space of just being so critical on yourself, you're right, you don't see the good things in your life and you don't see where you're actually succeeding because you've just got so much focus in on all the reasons why they're like you're not good enough and that you are failing and you're not seeing results. So I think just that's such beautiful advice to anyone is literally like, number one, be aware of the way that you're speaking to yourself on a daily basis, and number two, catch it and try and focus. And as hard as it is, it's so fucking hard. I remember like when I had to start changing this story, I was like, I don't fucking like anything about myself. Like, oh. And I know a lot of people will probably resonate with that. So it's like, well, just, it's hard, but it's like, well, you can play victim to it or you can take responsibility. And it's like, you do deserve to be happy and you do deserve, you know, live such a fulfilling life. And it literally can start with a 1%er of just, writing one thing that you like about yourself.
I think it's a really good point though. I think the amount of times I've told clients, like, no one else determines your worth, you do.
Yeah.
That starts with you. Like, who has control over how you feel? You do. Like, who has control over your worth and if you're good enough? No one else has that. But we place and we are taught that it is built on external things, and it is not. It is so internal. So, you know, can be a very empowering feeling to go, I can change this. No one can change this but me. Like, yes, people can have comments and say things and I can see things, but I can choose to change that narrative and that story. And I determine my worth. No one else does.
Yes. Oh, that's so empowering. And I think that's such a beautiful way to end off the episode. So Kim, thank you so much for coming on, taking the time. I love talking to you and I love picking your brain, all of these things. So thank you so much, Kim, for jumping on the episode, taking the time. I appreciate you so much. If anyone has any questions or needs anything clarified from this episode, send me a DM and I'll send them to Kim and then we can get them all answered for you. But thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Always love having a chat with you, Laura.
The number one challenge that all my clients face before we start working together is a lack of clarity on how much and what to eat to lose weight. Often they are making two huge mistakes, constantly trying to skip meals or eat under 1,600 calories. Secondly, only allowing themselves bad foods like chocolate on the weekend, but end up binging, all to tell themselves they're going to start again on Monday. if you feel like you have tried every diet under the sun and still can't figure out what to eat to achieve your weight loss goals, take my free 2-minute quiz. You can find the link in the show notes down below, and it will help you figure out exactly what you're doing wrong with your nutrition and exercise, and exactly what to do to fix it, so that you can finally be confident in your body and achieve your weight loss goals.